In 2017, I was 17 years old and I felt completely lost as a teenager. I had no sense of how the world worked. I tried to battle with my own thoughts and I didn't know how to control my mind. All of this frustration led me feeling isolated, with no friends, being alone in my room, playing video games, watching YouTube, and didn't really have a direction. My overthinking thoughts were being avoided by all the social media that I was consuming in order to escape the harsh reality of the fact that I didn't know how to control my own mind. This led me to go and seek for help. And so I went online and I researched something that could help me. Alas, I stumbled upon a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book is a fairly popular book that a lot of people have heard about today, but yesterday that was a relic which I have put all my faith upon. I've heard that this book changed a lot of people's lives, and I decided to take a crack at it because I was tired of my overthinking thoughts. I was tired of not being able to fit in. I was tired of being a teenager without a sense of direction of where my life was going or how to even handle this human character. We humans, we tend to think the same thoughts we think yesterday. And we also tend to think the same thoughts tomorrow unless we have a new input into our brains that tell us to do so. And so reading that book has completely opened my mind to other ways of thinking, to other possibilities. In the past, I've read books, but it wasn't with a deep sense of love and heart. You know, in school, we're constantly told to read in order to get a good grade, which unfortunately programs us to link reading with an external reward, which means after we finish school, we don't have that same sense of reward because there's no grade to get. And so we often leave the books with the school, far, far away, deep into the past. And we are scared to touch books. We think that books are evil, we think that reading is boring, and we start indulging in other habits like watching Netflix or ruminating on social media, just soul-sucking, consuming content for literally no reason. Like, how often do you remember the content that you actually watch, right? My journey with reading books was not linear. After reading How to Win Friends and Influence People, I put the book down and kind of forgot about the whole self-improvement thing. I still wasn't convinced that self-improvement was the way to go to reaching my higher self. So I continued to convince myself that watching YouTube videos was actually helping me quote-unquote grow, when in reality, I was just watching fitness influencers live their own life while I was sitting on the sidelines simply consuming their life. I was trading my precious time for consuming their content. This radically changed when I went to a sales internship in Virginia, which has caused me to look deeper within myself. When I was going through hardships of selling door to door, I realized that I can't cope with my emotions as well as I thought I could, and that one book simply was not enough to teach me about human communication. And so I went out and I started ordering books on spirituality. I started to expand my horizon and how I perceive myself and how I'm aware in certain moments. After consuming 2 books on spirituality, I realized how much more expanded my world is, which made me come to a very staggering conclusion that the more we know, the better informed choices in life we can make. The more ways there are to think about a certain situation. You're not closed off. There's not only 2 doors in front of you. In fact, there's 100 doors in front of you, but because you read a book on how to choose the best door, there's only 2 possible choices. This has caused me to go on an immense journey to self-improvement in reading. I was finally convinced that reading is the move, and so I began to read, still not religiously, but about a book a month, we'll say. Slowly, my life started changing on an exponential level. My relationships started to improve. I was having less fights with my parents. I was being complimented on the fact that I'm quote-unquote smart when I talk. My vocabulary started increasing, and my overall view of the world and how I see myself completely altered. Every single lesson that I have learned in those books, I am currently applying to this day. Because the beauty of reading a book as opposed to watching a YouTube video is that reading a book takes time to consume, which means that you're constantly revisiting the ideas and you are given enough time to implement them. Whereas with a YouTube video, after you watch a 10-minute YouTube video on something informative, you easily forget the information right after because there's no inclination to apply it, and the algorithm on YouTube moves you straight to the next video. And so you don't have enough time to have proper recall in order to solidify the information in your brain. Hence why reading will always beat short form learning. Whether you're trying to convince yourself to learn through TikToks or Reels or YouTube videos, the best format, and people in the past history can vouch for this because we have learned through manuscripts and the word of mouth that reading is the best, one of the best forms of learning. So this brings us to the present moment. I'm currently in the process of reading one book a week, and it is completely changing my mind. With every book, I get a new sense of the way I perceive the world. I'm also able to give more advice to my friends as well as the people on YouTube. I'm able to provide more value as a human being. The benefits of reading one book a week is endless. But now let's get into some practical steps as to how you yourself can use this information in order to increase the books you read on a daily, monthly, or a yearly basis. Starting with the first one, make sure you read while you take notes. This is huge because if you simply skim over a book, you are not going to retain a lot of the information. In fact, we learn by recall. This is why schools often give you quizzes and long form or short form answers to write, because it engages your brain to activate the recall portion, which solidifies the information that you have learned. Another way to increase the books that you read in a week is listening to audiobooks. Audiobooks are huge because you can listen and gain information when you're doing some of the most mundane tasks on a day-to-day basis. You can be washing the dishes and listening to a great book. You can be driving a car to work. You can be literally sitting on the toilet while you listen to a podcast or an audiobook. The possibilities are quite literally endless. And finally, I recommend not reading every single book you come across. There's always a lot of information out there, and some information might stick to you better than other information. And this tendency to stick to things when we don't have to is called the sunken cost fallacy, which is essentially a psychological phenomenon where we tend to feel like we've invested so much time into something that we need to follow through with it. But realize that whether you follow through with it or not, that time is gone. You've invested in it anyways. So what truly matters is in the future, is what you're going to do with your time next. So if you feel like a book is not resonating with you, you do not need to read it. Put it down and move to the next one. And finally, read books that are applicable to your life currently, because you are a lot more likely to take action on the things you read when it directly applies to your life. So if you have relationship problems, I suggest reading a book on relationships to help you solve that, as opposed to reading about something completely random, like the history of the Aztecs. So with that being said, it definitely couldn't have been more clear that reading is probably one of the most powerful things in the world that you can do, because your brain is quite literally like a sponge, and the quality of your life equates to how much you know at that moment. Because think about a lot of the mistakes that your parents made. It's not that they're not smart, it's that they didn't know better. They were doing the best that they could with the information that they had at the time. Which makes me come to the conclusion that the more we know, the more informed choices we can make. So I hope and I wish you luck on your new reading journey. I hope you get into it. It's not easy, I'll be honest. The first couple of times I've tried reading one book a week, it was hard. But eventually, it will become second nature, and you are actually going to really enjoy it. It's like going to the gym for me now. It's just a part of my life. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.